Hey everyone, welcome to Product Stories Podcast. This is where I meet and talk to some of the best product and design folks in the industry. If you're on Apple Podcasts or YouTube, do leave a review. I would love to know what you think about the show. Our guest for today's episode is Sahil. Sahil is currently a product designer at Gojek. He was previously at Ibibo. In this episode, I'll be talking with Sahil about leveling up in the design industry and how to grow in the design industry. I'm your host, Kaushik Murli, and you're listening to Product Stories. Hey Sahil, welcome to Product Stories. Super glad to have you here, man. Been looking forward to this from the time I started talking to you. I've been super excited for this episode. So I'm pretty sure you don't need an introduction. Most of the people in the Indian design community already know you. But either ways, do introduce yourself to the listeners.
Hey Kaushik, it's great to be here and thanks a lot for inviting me. I think it's definitely been something that I've been looking forward to as well. I think I've watched a bunch of your videos on YouTube as well, and I think I like the case study format that you do. Talking about like different aspects of people's lives and in general a lot of concepts also. I think that's great to hear and again be able to join that s- same space ready to be able to share my thoughts. I think that's really interesting. And I think to all the people who will also be joining this and actually be seeing all of this. Uh, and a bit about me, I am Sahil, as you all already know. I'm a self-taught product designer. I think I've been in the design industry, so to say, product design, and from the past, I think 6 years now. And it's been a journey through different types of products or different types of industries, from hospitality to mobility to I don't know, enterprise logistics, and pretty much like every single sort of domain that I can think of. I'm right now working with an Indonesian startup. It's called Gojek, and I work with their food product, which is called GoFood. And yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things I've learned over the years, being able to work in both product companies and as well as sort of enterprise companies, and getting a sense of how do you how do you work across, and how do you really grow up in that ladder when it comes being a single designer in a very small company to slightly on a slightly senior role or a mid-level role to uh, maybe say in a larger company. So I think, yeah, there's been a bunch of learnings, and that's what I am here to share today with you. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, Sahil. And as you said, right, you have been in the design industry for quite some time, almost 6 years now. What are some of the insights that you have, or like what are some of the learnings that you have over the 6 years, right? Because the Indian design ecosystem has changed so much over the past few years. With every year, it's constantly changing even now, right? So, what are some of
Yep, yep.
like your learnings and insights? I would love to know.
I think I mean there's a lot of things I can probably speak about if I try to get very granular. But I think there are some of the key sort of things that I've taken away from this space. One would be to probably not limit yourself early on in the career. This is a discussion that I have a lot with my friends, with a lot of people in the industry, which is that what people try to do initially in their career is they try to narrow down the scope of things that they do, and hold themselves sort of to this one value or this one thing that they really want to do. For example, I just want to do UX now, or I just want to do, say, just one thing, whatever that is, right? Motion design, interaction design, whatever. I feel like, and again, this is an advice that I've given to a couple of my own friends in my friend circle who have moved to product design or UX, in general or whatever. Uh, I think people should not really try to like sort of jump too early and that basically catch on a boat and sort of stick to that. They should be pretty open initially in their career and try to figure out what are the different things that are out there, because you only will get to learn about things that you're really good at once you actually start experimenting with all the things that are out there, right? For example, for me, I started from a UI design background, uh, probably a UI design background, because 6 years back no one knew what UX meant, man. I mean, it was a very weird place to be in. I remember my first internship. So So the reason it's a very interesting story. The reason I came into design was because I used to have a tech YouTube channel and I would make videos for that. And over the period of time, I learned how to do Illustrator, Photoshop, and all that stuff. And learned design along the way. Again, it's not like design, but it's just hands-on stuff that got my work done. So the first internship that I got when I finally applied in the industry, I did not even know what UX meant. So it was very difficult for me. But I did, I did a basic Google search, try to figure out, okay, this is somewhat, along the lines of what UX or UI is supposed to be. So I just made like a quick mock-up of an app. I submitted the assignment. So what I realized was, since the first day that I've been there, right, as a UI designer, what I was, even though I was thinking I'm a UX designer or whatever, I was thinking at that point of time, I realized everything about you changes, right? When you start working on things, you grow a lot. Your basically your perception about who you are as a person and what are your like strong points and things that you really enjoy changes a lot. So it's okay to initially sort of experiment and keep the umbrella wide open to figure out that, okay, these are the things that I really want to do. These 4 5 6 things are what I want to experiment with, and you never know what is something that's going to really stick with you in the longer end. And even then you don't know, right? Maybe 15 years down the line you might change something else. Like, every day through, at my design job, I feel like, is this really what I do want to do for the next 3 4 5 years as well? Or can there be better problems for me to solve that go beyond, the lens of design? Like, can I go, maybe say for example, what about product management? What about uh you know to us, on a very small level, being a product owner or something like that? Is that something I can do? Or maybe even a different field altogether, for example, just research or business analytics, in general. So I think it's perfectly fine to not know in a lot of cases and not be very sure of what you're doing, uh, because in this sort of time in life, people expect you to be like spot on from the very day one, right? So I think it's perfectly fine, man. You figure things out as you go on, and yeah, just it's okay to keep learning, keep evolving, and you'll eventually reach, if there is a destination at all, you'll reach there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, especially like there is this some notion that these days that you have to have it all figured out from day one. That you
Yeah.
need to know that where will you be in 10 years, what do you want to do with your career, what is design to, right? Sometimes you
Yep,
just
yep, yep.
are clueless about it. And the thing is, actually discovered UX design like way back when I was in college. But I didn't do anything about it because I literally still didn't understand what it was, or I still
Mhm.
didn't know if design is what I wanted to do, right? I kept coming back to that question whether do I want to do this? Do I want to work on this every day? Right. So yeah, I think that notion is something that we should move away from, especially as designers, because to a large extent, most of us try to be perfectionists as
Yeah.
designers, and and I think that's like a notion which we definitely need to move away from.
Yeah. No, I mean, completely agree. And I think one more small bit, adding to what you said is also, this also reflects in our approach to design these days. Always trying to find the perfect course, the perfect video to learn design, the perfect medium articles, which is, I mean, there's no such thing like that. I mean, you go through 100 things and figure out, you do, obviously you make mistakes, you figure out that, okay, this is something that's working, this is something that's not working, and you eventually reach to a point where, see, again, there are two types of people who learn from, the mistakes of others, people who learn from their own mistakes. If you're smart, you can learn from others' mistakes. If there are people around you at all who are making mistakes in the same thing that you might eventually make mistakes in, but if there are not, it's still okay to be not around, like, a lot of these people, and still try to figure things out on your own. One thing that I did learn, is it's great if you have a mentor, because they'll probably have made the same mistakes that you are going to make. So they'll save a bit of your time and maybe help you a little along the way, guide you in the things that you've done. Because I mean, not just initially, right now, I think one thing that I've struggled with, not really struggled with, but something that I've not really quite have had a great sort of luck on, probably, was, finding a mentor early. Honestly, because I did not even know that I need a mentor. I mean, I did not know that as a concept, that, you need a mentor, or even if you need one, like, should everyone have a mentor, right? So like very basic questions, right? Why do I need a mentor? How much time should I ask, from that mentor or whatever, whoever they are going to be, right? So I think some of these questions are also sort of tied in with that. So I think it's okay to sort of figure things out as you go ahead in your career. A lot of things will change, things you never expected, things that might not have happened with your mentor or the other person that you are that's around your friends and family. So I think, yeah, everyone's journey is unique that way, man. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of change, right? You have also been like, in various forms as a designer as itself. You've been a solo designer. You have had your own design studio, and now you are working with like a huge design team. So how has it been different? Like, how has each role? I mean, what are the kind of learnings that you have had in each role? What are like the fun aspects of each role? So
So yeah, I think that's a great question. Um, I think when it comes to design, it all sort of, especially like collaboration, right? It all boils down to sort of what's expected of you, right? In the initial days in my career, uh, what was really expected of me in general, or any designer who would have been there in the shoes that I was in, would have probably been just as filling in the filling in the place of like a tool, I would say, right? Wherein you're given kind of an idea to design, right? And that is where you start up making stuff, right? Now as you grow older in this sort of in this career, or in general in your role, you take on more complex problems, right? That is where sort of you working with teams or other people comes in, right? Because you need more people to help you work along some of these lines. So I think that is also what the journey mostly has been for me. Initially in my very early days, right, there was a startup that I used to work with. It's called Rido. It was a carpooling startup. uh, and I have great memories with them because they were the first ones who gave me a job, and honestly, I couldn't have asked for anything more for someone who did not have any experience. So it was a great start. And these were a bunch of folks fresh out of college. They did not know what UX meant. I did not know what UX meant, and we're all trying to sort of figure it out together. There were like three co-founders, and then there was me, a designer. They were also engineers. I mean, so they were also technically the engineering team. So from that first job, I think the way that I see this growth has been, right, it's mostly been in the terms of one, what kind of problems I've been solving. Earlier, it was very small problems in terms of how you would just, make UI or do stuff around visuals of an app, right? Then it started growing towards the line of uh, working on complex products, trying to solve complex problems, right? Not just, say, for example, a single thing, but maybe a product by itself. Towards probably now where it's more at a strategy level, so a UX strategy level. Again, strategy is a very heavy term. I would keep it very simple. It just means sort of defining where the product will eventually go, and how can UX as a as a component, or design as a component, not just UX, uh, help you take the product to that level. In terms of, I think, general difference in terms of how I've worked. Uh, Obviously, when I started, I was a solo designer, so there was honestly no one for me to sort of learn from. The feedback would directly be from the co-founders, in that first startup, and they also did not know maybe a lot because we were all learning together, right? So it was like a beautiful small team together. We were all learning together that okay, this is how you do design, this is how you give feedback, and all of that stuff. So I think that was really helpful. Eventually started coming towards slightly bigger teams. So then then the company that I joined had like I think 5-7 designers, and we were still working on completely different products, so we would not collaborate a lot because the problems were still not that big that you would start collaborating with a lot of folks. We did do like internal design reviews. You talk to, I would show my designs to the other person. I was like, dude, how do you think, like, what do you think about it? But then it was more like it was very casual, and it would not, in a lot of cases, it would not be about UX, right? People would be like, oh man, this looks so cool, right? The UI looks good, because we're all like very young, and we would not get that much in depth about, okay, this is, this. We would not go about asking, okay, what are the business goals? Why are you showing this to me? We were not very critical of things, right? To where we are now, I think, at Gojek, because the kind of uh, scale that we're building at, right, is immense, right? So everything becomes very magnified. The smallest of the things you do, the smallest of the features you make, hit millions of people on a daily basis, right? So you have to be very intentional about what you do. And this is where I think I've learned the biggest lesson in my life, which is collaboration. So in my team right now, the food team, I think there are close to 13 or 14 designers, which also involves, say, interaction designers, motion designers, UX writers, researchers. So there's people from different disciplines of design and otherwise coming in together to sort of collaborate on one single problem or multiple problems, trying to solve that for the company, right? And I think mostly it's been that. Now I'm trying to learn more about how do you sort of manage energies, try to get things done with not just designers. Earlier I think it was just designers. Now it's coming towards stakeholder management and trying to figure out, okay, how do you participate on a level where you're able to interact with the business directly, right? And set expectations, right? And tell them, okay, that this is how design thinks. uh, you know we can help you achieve goals that you have as a business, right? So I think that is how the role, uh, in general, and the kind of work that I've done from a solo designer to where I'm now has changed to some extent. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I can still relate to. I mean, it's very hard for me to relate to the your Gojek stories because I have always worked with smaller teams, like really small teams,
Hmm.
as an intern and now as a full time designer also. So the which is what leads to like my next question, which is like when you're designing something for like say today like Gojek has like 29 million to I think 30 million users, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Like how do you go out with taking these design decisions for like designing certain features, making like certain whether you want to even work on that feature or not, right? So that's something I would definitely like to know because it's so much more different when you're working as a solo designer or
Yep.
when you're working with a small team, right? The bandwidth is so low that you sometimes the design is based. I mean, the decisions are based on data. Sometimes it's pure gut decisions.
Yep. I think in case of Gojek, a lot of understanding of what the problems are. So it always starts with the problem itself, right? That's what is at pretty much the core of whatever we do at Gojek. There's always a problem, be it from business, be it from our research team, which conducts a lot of research and helps us figure out, okay, that these are the things that we're not doing really well or we can improve in, and these are the things we're doing really well, so maybe we can get a little bit better at it, or these are the future opportunities that we where we can grow and maximize sort of. Those pretty much are, I think, the entry points for where it all starts from, right? From there, I think it's trying to understand that, okay, for example, if I want to build a new feature, and obviously having had prior discussions with the research team and figuring out, okay, is this really going to be helpful? For example, they talk about a problem and you figure out together that, okay, this sounds like something that's very interesting, and this might also be able to contribute to the business goals of the for the year, right? For example, obviously it has to some extent contribute to the business goals, right? It can't be a problem that's completely different from what the business goals are, right? There are smaller things that you do as a designer, time to time, to improve product experience, but I'm talking about, say, a big feature, right? That is where you collaborate with the stakeholder, all the stakeholders, and tell them that, okay, this is what we've learned. So generally, what we do is we will have these cadences, right? We'll have these meetings in which there's a researcher, there's an engineering lead, there's a product manager, there's a designer, sometimes there's even an interaction designer, or like a visual designer, and we'll all sit together, and the research team will sort of share their insights, that these are the problems that we've learned over the past, say, couple of months, or over the past 2-3 researches, and this is what we want to sort of propose, that these are ideally what we should be looking at, right? Now that is where sort of all the team comes in and they share their thoughts. Product designers chip in and sort of share their ideas around what are the things that can be done to solve this problem. and what are the different approaches to probably tackle this problem and reach whatever the goal is that is agreed upon in those discussions. So that is where the probably the expectation is set, that okay, this is the problem that we know for sure. Obviously, if we are not very sure about if this is a big enough problem, we do say, for example, market sizing research, try to understand how big of a like sort of demographic is affected by this problem, right? Or even to some extent, if that is not something that's available to us, just try to, because everything is data backed, you can just go back and look at data and figure out that okay, 2 or 3 million people are impacted by this, right? For example, say something goes wrong at checkout. We know that this is a very important problem because it's checkout, right? So depending on which area you're in, uh, we try to figure out, okay, this is the number of people that's roughly going to be impacted, so obviously this is a bigger problem that we want to solve. From there we start brainstorming with the team that okay, what can be the different ways of doing this. That is where, and one thing that I really like about Gojek is the involvement from the very get-go. Like I did, like we like to involve like product managers, engineers. There's pretty much always an engineering lead, there's always a product managers, there's we try to involve copywriters, motion designers. Motion design, I think, still plays sometimes comes a little later in the sort of process, because you also have to keep in mind everyone's bandwidth, right? You don't want to involve everyone in every meeting unless and until it's something that's useful for them. So we try to involve everyone who's necessary and who's going to add value, and they might have something to share which uh, might change the way that we look at that, say, problem or feature. uh, Once we've sort of decided that okay, these are the 2-3 things that we want to do, based on the kind of bandwidth that engineers have, based on the kind of bandwidth that designers have, or the time that it's going to take, if it's going to fit into that, say for example, second half or first quarter or second quarter or whatever that is, then we go about designing that feature, right? This is where the product designers will closely collaborate with the product managers, and set the right expectations of that okay, this is what ideally we want this feature to do. This is what a good future is going to look like, if this product is successful, if this feature is successful. uh, Again, a lot of insights during that stage are also shared by researchers, and once we've finalized things, it again goes back to sometimes research team. If you want to do a usability session, if we just want to test it with people if this is something that's useful at all for them, or if it's even meeting the original goals that we had in place, right? So that is something we do from there on. After that is generally goes to the interaction design team, the visual design team, they work on the visuals. At that point also, sometimes if you're not very sure that okay, will people be able to understand that this is a button versus this is a chip, then if it's required, we'll again go back and do like a session, a test again there as well. So there's actually a lot of testing along this sort of route, right? Because whatever we ship, we know that this is something we definitely want to vet through all the people that we know and ensure that this is something that's usable, right? Even in those cases, still a lot of times when you actually send something out to production, there's always going to be like cases where something comes up you never knew, right? You're like, I could not have thought of it, right? And this sometimes comes after you've had a session with like the QAs, the product managers, and literally everyone in the team trying to find edge cases. And everyone does that really well. And then there's this user popping up on Twitter and telling you, what's wrong with this? And you're like, oh God, I never thought of this. So I think the structure, the process, right, is the most important part of pretty much everything that we do at Gojek. So the way the process has been set in a way so that it eliminates, to some extent, I would say, not completely, obviously it's just not possible, but to some extent eliminates the chances of a product failing simply just because it does not even meet up to the basic expectations, right, of users, of business, or whoever is involved. So I think it's through this process that we're able to build products that we know, we feel to some extent confident in, and we know that okay, this is something that is definitely, we feel that it's going to work based on our research, based on whatever we've done. And again, once and then it's pushed out, we track the numbers, we figure out that okay, these are the things. Again, that is the initial setting up the success metrics that's done with the PM. So we'll try to monitor those. In a lot of cases, the PMs also help us out with figuring out what should be the right success metrics in case we're only looking at, say, a very smaller set of metrics. After that, there's always learnings, right? That is where it also becomes an iterative cycle. You've just released the MVP of the product. Now the research team does more research. There's a lot of social media listening. That's something we always do. So there's like dashboards set up for social media listening. So whenever people share some social media feedback, it comes to us first, or maybe not first, but second, third, somewhere down the line. And we get to know that, okay, this is completely like not working versus this is working really well. People seem to be really excited about this. And that is probably then what shapes the second iteration, the third iteration, the future of the product, and also helps us learn that, okay, this is really how people are interacting. So I think that's the kind of probably the design funnel or the design process we have at Gojek. And again, it also depends from feature to feature. Some features are very small, so there can be some features that will take 6 months to make. There would be some features that would just take like, I don't know, 6 days to make, or maybe a little less. It's generally not that low because you still need to test things, raise requests, raise a lot of requests with a lot of teams to ensure that everyone knows that, okay, this feature is being made. Take it through a lot of reviews through designers. So generally, it does become a long process, and I think that is what happens in bigger, slightly bigger design teams and products which have like a bigger target audience. It goes through a lot of different design reviews, not just design reviews but reviews, with stakeholders also in general, to ensure that nothing is missed. At least, I mean, at least the missing wala part is covered. If there's something that can be done more potentially, that again is, it's covered in further releases or down the line. But yeah, I think that's the baseline of what we look at. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I I can totally relate to the edge case part. Uh, to discover edge cases once it has gone to production, right? But in general, whatever you said so far is was like really insightful, and especially to understand like how bigger design teams function, because as someone who has probably never worked in a design team like larger than say 5 people,
Mhm.
it's I'm always curious to understand like how are decisions made, how do teams collaborate, how do so many people come together to work on just one single feature, right? Even though the feature might be something small, but it's crafted so well and done so neatly that it delights the user, right?
Yep.
So I was super curious to know this, and, I'm so glad you shared all the insights from that.
One more thing that I wanted to point when you talk about how sort of the team collaborates, I think, which is a very important aspect, which is actually being able to work async. I think this is something that people don't really talk a lot about. So 99% of my team sits out of Jakarta, right? I'm pretty much the only, I think, person in my team. And now there's a few more folks that have joined, specifically my team in food. I'm not talking about food, I'm talking about my specific team in food. So it's an even smaller team, right? And I think what really helps us a lot in a lot of cases, especially when it comes to design decisions, as you mentioned, is documentation. So that's the most basic thing that we really look forward to. We do a lot and we practice actively at Gojek across different teams. So be it food, be it transport, be it groceries, or the main platform team, or whatever team it is, right? So that is something we practice a lot, because again, you have to be mindful of the fact, especially in these times, right? Not There's only a fixed number of hours that you have in a day, right? And that's true for pretty much everyone, right? We all have the same number of hours in the day. So we want to be mindful of how much time we're taking up of someone who's in front of us, trying to understand something that we've done. So how do you go about ensuring that they get to know what they want in a format that's easily consumable for them, and they can do it at at their discretion, right? Be it maybe during the work hours or later, or whenever they have time to actually do it, right? So I think documentation is something that's really helped. When before Gojek, I actually I was previously working with Goa Vibo, and I think because the team was mostly sort of co-located, we were all working together, especially my team was sort of working together. So it would not require us to do a lot of documentation, uh, especially because of the the way that the team was set up, right? The fact that the PMs, the engineers, everyone from my team was literally just one block away from me, right? They will literally sit next to my table. So in those cases, I think, and especially when the teams are not that big, documentation is not that important. It's still great to maintain if you can do it, if you have the time to do it, which I think you should take out the time to do it. It's great because it helps you track decisions. Whenever you try to retain something in your memory, there's always going to be some kind of mess up that you do, because you can only contain so much information in your brain, right? So every time you rethink about it, some kind of data is modified, right? So that's what I tell people, that the more amount of information is stored, specifically if it's numbers, you're probably going to modify them a bit every single time you tell it to someone, right? So you don't want to do that. You want to have everything in one place. So that is something that really helps us out, man. I mean, it saves so much time. It's great because you can directly give feedback even if you're not directly in that design review. Say for example, you had some other meeting come up and you still want to give a design review, or you want to see what happened in the design review, you can do that. So I think that is yeah, the basis of communication is very important in slightly larger design teams, and not just design teams in general. I think in just larger companies, larger orgs as well, communication makes for a very important I would say component of how the teams work together. So yep.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think documenting does not just stop there, but today, like since so many of us are working remotely, right? Documentation plays such a huge role. So one of my previous guests, who has been working remotely for the longest time, and he was talking about how every single thing that is done by him is documented, which ensures or allows them, everyone in the team, to work in different time zones at the same time. All the communication is async, right? So that's something which he was talking about, and I think it felt very relevant to, like, designers in general, because documenting also helps us to go back and understand why we took a certain design decision also, right?
That's true.
So on the same lines, right? How do you think, like, a designer, or like any, like a junior designer? I'm Most of the time I ask these questions purely from my own context. So, like, how do you think one should, like, get started with documenting? Um, Not just I mean, I don't want you to just talk about like how to get started, but at the same time, what are the things that one should document, and what are like some of the unnecessary details which don't need documenting?
Interesting. So I recently did this session where I talk about documentation. So I'm probably going to bring some of the points from there. uh, I think starting with like why, okay, why should you document at all, right? Probably let's just start with that, and then we'll figure out how, right, and where to document. The reason why you should document is because uh, whenever you start working on like a bunch of things together, you always want to have some kind of recorded source of truth where people can go back and sort of reflect. Both you as well as your team can go back and see that, okay, this was done during this time, and this was the person who worked on it, and this was what they were thinking when this was made, right? That's the very basic the reason why you need a document at all. Why documentation exists, right? So there's some kind of source of truth. Now, why is there a need of source of truth? The need that depends, from say a company to company, right? For example, one of the examples that you gave could be because there are people who are separated in different time zones, right? So that source of truth is then further doubles up as that document which helps everyone bring, get everyone, get in that same plane, that okay, this is something that's being done regardless of what time zone they're in, right? So they can always go and see that document, that okay, this is what the person has done recently, and they're also in a different time zone, and probably they're also maintaining their own version of that document, and the other person can then sort of, even though there are different time zones, still collaborate and still collaborate really well, right? So I think that's where sort of documentation comes in. Now, the purpose that it can serve for different companies can be different. For example, for us, the reason why we maintain documentation uh, like so probably so well, to the extent that we do, is because we want to bring in transparency. The goal that we have is transparency, and obviously ensuring that everything gets communicated really well, because there's so many stakeholders involved that it's sometimes very easy to be working in your own small silo and keep working on it, and sometimes people just don't know, get to know about it, right? So ideally what you want to do as an individual is ensure, how do you how can you project these things outwards, right? How do you let people know that, okay, this is something I've been working on, not just for the sake of showing people what you're working on, but also to get their feedback in a lot of cases, right? Because there's always, especially if you're a part of a bigger, if you're a cog inside a bigger, like a machine, right? You want the people to be able to see how exactly is it you're turning, right? How exactly, what is your movement, so that the machine can see, how that cog is performing, right? And if there's something sort of wrong, they can help, right? In due time, right? Be it anything, right? For example, be it with feedback, or with helping them figure out if the approach that they're taking is the best approach. Now, how do you go about documentation? What I like to generally say is, like, do not, like, make a big commitment when it comes to documentation. Generally, the rule of thumb here probably would be, whatever is repeated again and again can be just, if it's just put in a document, it's going to save you a lot of time, right? Probably where you can start from is, if there is something that is being repeated again and again that you're doing to a lot of people, right? A lot of stakeholders are telling the same thing again and again. It's probably better you document it, right? Because it's going to save you a lot of time. That's probably the most basic version of a document, just writing things that you'll have to tell people again and again 100 times. Every time a new PM joins, every time a new designer joins, every time a new engineer joins, you have to go through, take them through the very basics. That is probably where this first, sort of the first basis. After that, the second part of it, and also I think the more important version of it, would also be ensuring that the document at least has a log of all the things you've done, the meetings you've conducted, and all the decisions that were taken, right? So a decision log is the most important part of any document, because that is what eventually people forget. Ki, what did we think? What was the decision that was finally taken? When we were deciding, between feature 1 and feature 2, obviously people will remember that feature 2 went out. That is what was shipped, because it's there in the product, you can see it. And you also have some kind of, understanding that, okay, this is probably why the feature 2 was shipped out, but what were the exact reasons that feature 1 was not shipped out, right? Probably, or was it something that we were thinking that, okay, maybe let's do feature 2 for now, and we'll look at feature 1 after some time, because we don't have that kind of time due to, say, a bandwidth crunch or something like that. So I think that is where this decision log comes in place. So having some, having a basic of, basic understanding, or just fundamental level of understanding of, what you are doing as an individual in a team, on a very feature level or product level, whatever that is, keeping a decision log of all the things you're doing. And then as the document evolves, it can become so much more, right? For example, the way that we currently do at Gojek, I can give you some probably examples from that. Is what we also do really well, and recently I've started doing is, in generally, so this is specific to my team, so I'm going to talk from that perspective. uh, in a lot of cases, what I've seen is, the PRD generally exists as a separate document, right? So the PRD is always something that's more or less made by, the product manager, a business analyst, the business intelligence team. They're working in together. Sometimes the designers collaborate on it, so, to share their insights on it. The way that we do it in my team is, the PRD and the design doc is one document, right? So we collaborate together. It used to be a separate document earlier, but we realized the amount of documentation that's anyway happening in the design doc is to an extent that it can pretty much help up with the PRD as well. So we merged it together. Now there's parts of success metrics and business engagements that we also record, and it also goes inside that one doc, wherein we're talking about all the things that needed to be tracked. For example, we'll work with the PM to define, in that one design doc there'll be a section for example, tracking, success metrics, like what are the success metrics that we want to track. There's one section that's specifically for engineers that helps with handoff, right? We're telling them, okay, that this is the motion design, this is the interaction we want to do, right? So this is the timeline, here are the lottie files, this is the one that we went with. So that is for engineers. Then for QAs, we make every single use case, right, that exists, or at least that what we know, before it goes to production and, is eventually told to us by users. We try to, again, this is some a place where we also collaborate in. So what we'll generally do is, we'll just make a table, right? And we'll do the use cases that we know, edge cases we know, and we'll leave empty boxes, right? So that if QAs can come up with a use case, or engineers or PMs or whoever in the team can come up with a use case, they just write it down, and we just put a design next to it, and we'll put the link to the design, right? Be it abstract, like Zeppelin or whatever you use, so that they can directly go. And I think this has evolved over a period of time, right? we're doing a lot more work around it now in terms of say intelligence and ensuring there's probably like richer data in that design doc as well. But again, this is not something that happened from day one, right? Day one, this document was very bare bones. It just told you problem, like goal, what are the approaches, and the decision log. That's it. That was the first version of this talk. So I think it also depends on your team, your company, how fast you're moving, what is the kind of team structure. Are there things you need to communicate remotely? If I mean, especially during this time, I'm assuming the answer is most probably yes. uh, so can you offload some of that information from your brain to probably, from to a Google Doc or wherever you want to keep it, so it's easy for everyone to follow through? So I think that's how uh, you probably start making a document, and why you should be making a document, and probably what are the benefits, and how do you go, and how do you then scale it up. So trying to cover a bit of all these things. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's such a comprehensive guide for why someone should get started with documenting and how to document, right?
Hmm.
And I definitely got a lot of insights from this because but that this is like one challenge which we have been facing is figuring out
Yeah.
how to document and like we used to exist without documenting a lot of things and moving forward with it. But as and when the team started growing, even we started facing like a lot of issues when it came to documenting or just understanding why we took a certain decision, right? And this whole concept of decision log was something which I'm hearing for the first time now. So it's like a like a really good thing to know and something that I can definitely take back from this my interaction with you.
Sorry. Yeah, and I think it's very important. So the meeting log, right? The decision log or the meeting log, whatever you want to keep it, the updates log is the most important bit, because there's going to be like hundreds of discussions along that project and throughout the journey of that project, right? Be it like a generally for very small features, honestly, we don't do that a lot. For example, if it's like a 1 week thing, right? We will not invest that much time. But generally, I would say majority of the projects go from 1 month to probably 3, 4, 5, 6 months, sometimes even a year. Uh, so we like to keep it that way. And I think one problem, that you also mentioned, and I've seen a lot of cases. Since I've been telling my friends as well that okay, why don't you start documenting? Is that people start from a very big commitment, man. People are like, nay, from the day one, I'll just make this like a wonder of the world, right? I'll make this the best thing that's out there. And I think that's the problem, right? You're expecting too much from yourself. You don't even know what you need to put in there, right? So it's okay to start small, figure things out, on the way. Again, going back to the very first advice, I think you just need to understand, at that point of time, that okay, this is what me and my team needs, and this is something that will definitely add value to them, so let me just add this. That's it. And from there on, every time you have a conversation, with the team, with the PMs, the stakeholders, figure out, is this something that I can put in my document? Is this going to help them? Or you know can I do it a little bit better? Can I avoid these 3 meetings somehow? Can I avoid this daily meeting that happens because of whatever reason? Can I offload some of this, do it async? So that is how you go about building, that you go about building that and optimizing, because that's the next step. You just keep on optimizing once you've built it. So yeah.
Yeah, true. So moving forward, from the documenting part is something which I want to discuss with you is like you've been in the design industry for easily 5 6 years now, and something which what we started off the episode with is that how the design industry has been evolving, how the design community in general has been evolving, right? So one thing which I want to understand is like how has the landscape changed over the past 5 6 years for designers to get started in UX, right? How like what has changed? What are the new things that are available today, and how can one get started today?
Very interesting question. And I think I get a lot of questions around this on Insta all the time. So I can definitely relate to this on a very personal level. I've been also trying to help two of my very close friends from childhood uh, try to get sort of started into design. One of them is a musician, so he's so from very different backgrounds, right? So it's very interesting to see how different people sort of take different routes to learning design, right? So it's a very so I just feel that design is very beautiful that way, people coming from different fields. Now, in case of problems, right? What are the problems, or in general, just talking about how the landscape has changed? I would say there's a few things that I've seen, that I've witnessed, that I feel are definitely the biggest ones that have changed. So again, this could just be me speaking from my experience, but I feel UX came very late in India, or at least it became late. It became mainstream very late. I would say it's still not mainstream. Like people still catching up to it. Uh, we happen to be in one of the the good companies, the companies that understand about UX, product design, or all these functions in general. So we are surrounded by people that know of it. But I would say probably, if you look at the bigger, like India, right, probably 99.9% of the companies don't really know well about what UX design is supposed to mean, because there's way too many companies if you try to keep track of it. So the problem that I feel, the way that I see this evolution has gone is, back at that point of time when I started six-ish years ago, I think it's more or less. The biggest problem that I had, there was not enough for me to understand about UX. Right? It was either that, or maybe I was just dumb to not be able to find the right resources. It's either of those. I don't know. But let's just go with the safer options. I'm going to say that there's not enough for me to, at least at that point of time, to sort of learn. What exactly is UX? Like, what exactly is it, man? It's very difficult for me. And you know what? Something that I take a lot of pride in is I'm really good at researching stuff. Researching, in terms of Google search, like a very basic Google search. So I try to do Google searches well, at least. So I try to do it at that point of time. I did find some articles, but it was very basic, right? I mean, you would not expect a lot like 6, 7 years ago. What I've seen since then till now is there's just way too much information. There's just a ton of content, and that is what scares people now. People literally come to me and ask me, which course should I do out of all these courses? They don't ask me where should I start, like in the sense that, okay, which should be the course that I do. Like, I don't even know of a course. They'll be like, I've seen 6 courses, which one of these should I do? And honestly, I don't know, because I've not taken those courses. So in a lot of cases, it's difficult for me to tell, right? Because back in I did not do courses as such, right? I just read from Medium, learned in office, while working on projects. So I think that's one of the biggest differences I've seen, that the amount of information overload that currently exists is making it very difficult for the young ones to get started. They don't really know which one to follow, and people fall in that trap. Ki, if I start learning from this course and it's a 3-month long course, what if 3 months down the line I've not learned anything? What will happen with my life? And people take this so seriously, and they're like, oh shit, I'm going to lose these precious 3 months of my life, which is okay. I mean, obviously, time is of the essence, but in a lot of cases people take these things very seriously. That, I think, is one of the biggest things that has changed. The other thing that's become actually very better is because the community itself has grown so much. There's so many people for you to actually reach out to, right? When I was learning, there was so less people. I remember going to Dribble meetups with like 6 people, 7 people. You try to go to a Dribble meetup now, even if there's like normal like UX meetups in lockdown, you'll see like 15 people, right? That's the kind of number that has increased, right? So as the industry has grown, I think a lot of people have become a part of this movement, right? In creating better digital products. So UX designers in general. So that, I think, is definitely something that's changed. A lot of these cohort-based courses, like 10K designers and all those, I think they're also changing the way that people interact with education, right? Because a lot of people have a hard time trying to follow a book or a course, especially a boring course, on Coursera or Udemy. So I think that is also something very new that I'm seeing. Even I'm not used to it. I mean, I've I had never really participated in a CBC, a cohort-based course, till a while back. And I think it's very interesting because people become like the small family, and they work together, they try to raise everyone up and help everyone learn. So I think that is really good, that was not there 5-6 years back. So these are, I think, are some of the things that I have seen. And also one very important bit I would say is, in general, I think the kind of importance that UX is getting now is great. In more and more companies, I see product design and design in general getting a lot of value in the companies. People know that this is a very key business skill. Design has always been, again, this is a very, I think, a topic that it invites a lot of arguments, but I think design has always been a tool to sell things. uh, and this, I think, this was also something John Maeda said in one of his videos I saw, that design has always been a tool to sell, right? And I think that is what people are now recognizing it for, rather than just being a support function, right? And I think that is the biggest change that I've seen in the industry side of things, not the people side of things, but more towards how people value designs. Industries, companies, the C-suite executives, they sort of value design in general. So yeah, that's
Yeah, true. Yeah, I definitely agree with those points. And I think, like, even though I was passively following all these things, I have witnessed, like, all these changes as well,
Mhm.
where there used to be like a handful of courses, and then suddenly there were so many Udemy courses. Suddenly there are so
Crazy.
many YouTube channels, right? And it just felt impossible to even learn, right? I still remember the first time I came across UI UX back in 2018. I was like, asked to, like, refer like a bunch of Medium articles.
Yeah,
And today if you go to Medium,
it's
there's just
random.
so much content.
So you know
There's so
what?
much content.
The cool part is, back then, I would still say, so around 2017, 2018, Medium still had a lot of educational stuff, right? Core educational stuff. Now a lot of UX content on Medium is lifestyle stuff, right? So for example, just generally talking about how people feel about things in UX, rather than actually fundamentals and trying to define all that. That's also because UX has evolved, right? So it's no longer just about just learning like where to get started in UX. Now it's become more things, right? Now it's become a little bit more evolved, so there are advanced problems, right? Now people are writing for like very sort of fictional case studies, not case studies, fictional problems that they've built up. In a lot of cases, they're very interesting, takes on how the future of UX is going to be and things like that. So very, what do you say, very abstract case studies. But I think in general, what I have seen is the articles that you would that you were probably sent, the ones that I was sent, have also changed a lot over time, right? So
Yeah,
that change I've also seen. Yeah,
yeah, and it has become so difficult to discover those articles also
crazy.
now. Yeah.
Because now
uh,
people gravitate more towards those fun articles. People want to read fun stuff now. People don't want to read like the boring 5 rules of
yeah.
UX you should know, and then those. Yeah,
Yeah, people also want something which is bite-sized and easy to consume.
yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
that's the general pattern across the industry. The attention, the period of attention that people give has been like shrinking like crazy. So people just want something for like 30 seconds, that's it. I just, and that's not like, I'm not just blaming other people. I mean, I'm also partly at fault, because the same thing. I have such a hard time trying to like follow through for a lot of videos. There were creators I used to love 6 years, 6 years back, not UX in general. For example, MKBHD is one of the favorite creators, I think, for everyone. I used to love his tech videos back in the day. I would like sit through the end credits, like literally all the way till the end animation. Now I just watch like 17, 18 seconds and I'm like, I pretty much know what the product is. So yeah, let's just go somewhere else. So yeah, attention span has crazy, like decreased crazy. Yeah.
yeah, and this has also created like new opportunities in content creation as well, right?
Yep.
So I've seen uh, people who create like brilliant Photoshop tutorials. I mean, I wouldn't call it tutorials, but like really bite-sized tips and tricks out of TikTok videos, out of Instagram reels, and it's just insane how captivating it is, and at the same time how it keeps your attention for that very specific brief amount of time.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, the content creation game is definitely changing because of that.
That's true. I think I've seen one of these. So I think I see some guy on my Insta stories making like these. How do you make a 3D cube in Illustrator? How do you make sort of those intertwinkled 3D pattern meshes in Illustrator? And they're like 30-second videos. And I don't even work on Illustrator. And I always see those videos because they're just interesting to see, right? So totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, especially even the Procreate videos where
All the
that
hype.
that drawing immediately. Yeah, and that even those videos are like surely interesting, and that's like one of the reasons I ended up getting an iPad and started illustrating as well.
Same, man. I kept lying to myself that this is a serious purchase, and this is so that I can explore a potential career as an illustrator. I Yeah, all I drew was like anime characters on it. I never like designed anything like drew anything like other than that, like proper illustration that I could use in my work. And Netflix. That's the second that was the second use case during that, but it's now like 90% Netflix and 10% like rest of the things. So yeah.
Yeah, I it's pretty much the same case. But anyways, let's actually take this a little further,
Mhm.
right? Like further from as a designer, I'm trying to learn now. Let's say I've learned like a good majority of things, and
Mhm.
I've got myself in a job. Like I'm just starting out, or I've been working as a designer for a year now.
Mhm.
What are like some of the common mistakes which you notice among people like me or people like junior designers who are like in the experience level of 0 to 2 years? What are like the common mistakes which they make? This can be in anything, right? This can be in when it comes to like their portfolios or the way they do interviews, or it can be just the way they do things at work. What are like the common mistakes which you have noticed? Right?
So I think there's actually a lot of points that we could probably cover here. So the way that you mentioned, right? So one is the interviewing side of it. The other one is like working at the office side of it, and I'm sure there's other like faces to it as well. Let's just take up how you like work at office. I think one again, as I said, there's a lot of things that you can improve, and it also depends person to person. I see a lot of things that are very common for people to do. Like people just feel that okay, this is common, so I should do it, whereas others don't know that it's supposed to be that obvious, and they don't do it. So I'll point out the ones that I think are not that obvious, I guess, and people should spend more time on. So one of the biggest problems that I see is people getting sort of too caught up with their work, right? Too attached to what they're trying to build, right? And siloing themselves in creating that one page, that one screen, and getting so attached to it that whenever feedback comes, you're like, oh, you know, I put in so much effort. Do I really need to change this? And then you shut yourself off to that feedback as well. And it's a weird place to be in. Like that is something that you definitely want to avoid doing. I know it's very difficult just by saying that you should avoid doing. That's not how things are going to work. It takes time. It takes time to get used to that style of, I think, working, wherein you kind of know that okay, this is what I want to do, and this should ideally also achieve business goals, right? Because you're not just designing because you like it, right? You probably design because you love designing, but you're in the company because you paid to you're paid to make stuff for them. So you have to keep those things in mind. At the end of the day, you want to help achieve those business goals. The second part of it is uh, somewhat connected to the first part, which is like just closing yourself in a very small space. Designers tend to be very antisocial, I feel. At least some of them do. I mean, I don't want to generalize anything here. I have been there, so I've done that. Whenever I keep telling myself, I want to get in my zone. I just don't disturb me. I'll just make the best stuff. So I'm just gonna keep myself away from people. But I've always felt that design actually does really well when you collaborate with people, right? Be it other designers, be it I don't know, product managers, engineers, QAs, business stakeholders, even founders, co-founders, if you're working in smaller startups, pretty much everyone, right? Back-end developers. So I think the real power when it comes to sort of making great solutions, not just like good looking pixels, comes to some bit from I would say collaboration, right? So don't close yourself off like that. Try to collaborate with people, try to talk to people around you. They're going to help you get great insights which you otherwise did not even probably either just not notice or maybe did not think of. So I think that's something that's going to come really handy, which has helped me as well. I mean, uh, and from there you generally then grow outwards. You start taking up, uh, owning up some bit of, say, business decisions as well. Driving strategy for the product as well. That okay, because you as a designer understand product like none other, probably in your team, right? So you're in that place where you can actually help, if not obviously lead, but you can at least help guide some of the decisions. Help other PMs see the value of what you are proposing them, that okay, this is a feature that I want to build, because based on my understanding of users, my understanding of things that that I've learned, I feel like this is going to really complement the user behavior, right? So I think these are the two or three things that I feel people can do better at work, especially. And obviously, I mean, just keep doing good work, man. You'll grow in life. Like in general, I think the funda is you keep doing good work. uh Obviously, getting feedback from people, because that's how you do good work. Otherwise, you can keep doing the same work and you think you're getting better without feedback, and you can keep doing it like wrong all of your life, and you'll probably think you're getting better at it, right? But it'll be the opposite. So do great work. And yeah, I mean, and think in retrospect always. uh Go back and see what do you think you could have improved. People sometimes just go on like this mindless spree of building stuff. I've done that, so I know. Personal example. You keep making stuff, you don't go back, you don't see what were the successes, what were the failures, what were the things that could have been improved. uh, could I have done this better? uh, you know uh, and even actually just seeing, in a lot of cases, this is mostly in case of, I think, service industry. People don't even know if the product that they built was successful, right? Because they're just tasked with the task to just ship things, right? Not then see did it work well, right? And if you do that, you don't learn if your designs are working, right? You don't learn that this was the right approach, or could it have been better, right? So I think that is some of the things that mostly are at office. And beyond that, I think in case of like interviews and all that, it's going to be very generic advice, but I would say focus on the problem that you're trying to solve, maybe, and try to tell it in a way that people are able to relate to it. One thing, I've been taking a lot of interviews lately at Gojek, and one thing I've learned in the past, I think, year or year and a half, is sometimes people get, again, too caught up in just the visual design aspect, right? Now I'm specifically talking about product design roles, so UX design, not visual design. uh, the advice would probably look a little bit different for visual design roles or for other roles as well. But in case of a product designer or a UX designer, as in a lot of cases, companies refer to them as, don't get too fixated on how things look, but also think of how they're supposed to work, right? If they're actually, if how you've made them is something that will map up to the expectations of what the users had in the first place. That, I think, that is something that people don't really think all that often. So that's something that one should definitely do. uh, Besides this, in general, work on your storytelling skills. The more interesting story you have around a product, people are able to relate to it, right? You can go about, just telling how your dashboard did not have click through rate because uh, the button was green and the other things were also green. And it will sound very robotic, right? It'll be like, okay, sure. And then you change the color of the button, right? Yeah, right. And that's how we increase the CTR by 8.5%. And we have 2 more million, and we have 2 more million customers, and we received round C of funding. People want stories, right? That's how people are able to relate to things, right? I mean, I find it very difficult, when I read books, I find it very difficult unless and until there's like a cool example that I can retain that concept in my mind. So I always find it easier to read books that have good examples, because then I can take away that concept in that format, that story which was tied to that example, right? So that's how my brain works. Now, I'm sure that there's millions of people around the world and they think differently. Some people have just amazing memory. Unfortunately, I don't. And I know how I work, right? So it's also about understanding you, but also understand the fact that when you tell stories, people are genuinely more intrigued. People are willing to listen. People want to know, "Acha, what's the next, okay, what happened after that? Like, what did you do? What did you learn from the research?" Right? You just tell them, okay, we got this data, and 5% of the people were not clicking this. And just, yeah, sound a little excited probably. I know this might be like asking too much, but I don't know. These are some of the tips I think, are very basic things you can change, which will help boost, your, in general confidence, and project you as someone who's really in control and knows what they're speaking about, right? Believe it or not, even the smallest of the changes that you'll make can be you know, the defining line between you getting selected or someone else getting selected. Not that this is a zero sum game. I mean, obviously, you go somewhere else, you'll find a better job probably. But I mean, it just helps, you be in a better place, present yourself better in general, I think. So yeah, I think these are some of the advices. Again, there's probably like a list of hundreds of things that you can improve depending on what you're doing, what you're not doing. But these are the most generic ones that I can think of, the more general ones that I think people should be doing more of. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, I really like the first point, which was where you talked about not attaching yourself too much to your design. I think I remember this tweet by Dharmesh, which I think which was on the lines that today in digital products everything is pretty much temporary,
Yep, yep.
and so the less you attach yourself with it, the better. And it's again it's design, right? It's constantly evolving. There are more iterations, there are more changes which
Yep, yep, yep.
constantly keep happening. So the less we attach ourselves to the design, and the more we probably attach ourselves to the outcome, I think that could be like a good thing. And that's something which we follow very closely at Onju. We are very outcome driven, and we we don't attach ourselves to like what we are created. And even if someone says that this is probably the worst design, we'll probably try to understand why it's the worst design and how it will affect our outcome,
Not like, oh
rather
shit.
than yeah. Now, like we're no longer, we don't think from the perspective that, oh damn, someone told our design is horrible. Like
We're done,
this
man. This is the end of the world.
this yeah, end of the world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's true. I think digital products is, I mean, that's what digital products are all about, right? The cost to change things is so low that you can just change them any day, right? It's not like a building, right? You're not an architecture, right? Sorry, you're not an architect. So it's not architectural design wherein you make a building and it will probably be there for like 50 years or 20 or 30 years, whatever the life of the building is, right? In digital product, you make a sign in page today, tomorrow that'll be changed because someone feels that there's some problem with it. So yeah, I mean, don't get too attached. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next question which I probably want to ask you is like something which I've noticed lately is that constantly how people have been moving between companies, trying to find the right role for themselves and etc. Right.
Hmm.
So since you have worked across the board in various forms of organizations and at different roles also, right? So
Right.
one thing which I want to understand is like what are like certain factors or certain things which one must consider before they move or change their role or like change the company.
All right. That's a great question. Which I've faced like a lot of times in life. I think there are three. Again, this is I discussed this with a lot of people, and I think more or less agree with the. So there are three things that I think are very important: people, process, and product in that order, right? So I think the most important thing for me is people. Whenever I go to a company, because it's the people that you'll be working with, right? And the smarter the people are, smarter in terms of the things that they do in general, uh, you can automatically assume that things are going to be better, right? They'll make better products. If there's smarter people, more motivated people, they'll be working to ensure that things work really well. So some of it is also tied. So I think people, because that is that is who you'll be working with. So you want to ensure that there's friendly people who don't eat you up at office. So that I think is very important, especially your manager, right? I mean, for your company, your manager is your whole company for you, right? I mean, that's literally more or less it. I mean, that's the person that you talk to on a day-to-day basis, and the one that you interact with, and also someone who's till to some extent, I would not say like obviously completely, but in the position to define your growth and career, in that company, right? They obviously help you set goals, and then that is where you sort of progress from. You have something to refer to, that okay, these are the things I should be doing. So I think a manager, or in general people around you, play that role really well. The second is process. So like how do people go about things? For example, you can have one of the best looking products, but if the process is like just sad, you get business requirements and you start doing UI design the next day without any research, without trying to figure out okay what's going on. Even if you like got like designers with like great chops, making like amazing looking stuff, but it doesn't really fit the bill, because the things that should be done are not being done. And because of that, you're doing a lot more iterations, because whatever you ship out, the chances of that failing are maybe a little bit higher than what it would have been when you would have probably done a bit of research. So that is where processes come in place, right? Processes are not just like from design perspective, but everything else as well, right? Maybe also how people are hired, right? That's also one of the things that you look for, that when you interview with a company, how was the process? Did you like it? In a lot of cases, what I've seen is, if the process itself for me, right, when I'm interviewing in a company is not good, that gives off a lot of hints. There's a lot of red flags. If you're smart enough, you can catch that, okay, this does not look like the kind of place I want to go, right? So I think process is second. The third one is product, which I think, if the first two are good, automatically the product is going to be good, right? But yes, product is also something that's very important. You want to keep that in mind as well, that the product is something that you can personally sort of feel connected to. You do not, for example, I have like certain domains in my like mind that I don't want to go in right now, right? Because I feel like uh, I'm either not ready or I've already worked on it. For example, let me just give you a very random example. For example, logistics is one of the functions, right? I've previously worked in the logistics domain, and I feel like there's so much for me to explore that I don't want to go back into logistics and work on it again, right? I feel there's a lot more things that I want to learn about human behavior, and that is something I'll only learn when I work on more consumer facing products, right? So it also depends on what kind of expectations do you have from what you want to learn. If you want to learn more about consumer behavior, right, you probably want to work in a consumer facing company which has maybe a little bit higher interaction with the customers, and you're also able to engage with them directly as a researcher or through other means, right? So I think the third one is product. Obviously beyond this is also like compensation and things like that, and expectation around like where do you want to eventually reach in life, what is the trajectory of the company, like what do they want to do, does that align with your growth trajectory in general? So there's a lot of other things, but I think these are the top three things that I look for if I want to go somewhere, uh, more or less. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a very interesting aspect. One more thing, I actually recently saw this in a YouTube video. I don't remember. I think it was Gary Tan or someone. I was thinking it was Gary Tan, and he did this. He made a video on this concept called uh, "Learn, Earn, or Quit." Right. So a very simple. It's oversimplified, I would say, but then it does some of those things. So learn is that, right, where you have people around you which help you learn, or product, or something that you find something in that there's some value that is being given to you, and you are not stagnating in your career, right? So you either stay in a company because you're learning. This is talking about why are you staying in a company, right? Not why would you join in a company. Probably also maybe why would you join a company. So one is learn, the other one is earn. There's a lot of cases where people feel like that okay, maybe I'm not learning all that much, but I'm happy with the compensation and whatever is, as a part of what I do as my roles and responsibilities, because in my life that is one of my priorities right now, right? Based on, maybe you have some liabilities in life, maybe you have some responsibilities to take care of, and you don't want to go through that, stress of applying in places and going, right? And you are happy where you are, and you find happiness in, the kind of things you do, maybe even if it's not that challenging or progressive in nature. But the last one is quit. If you don't like, if you're not doing either of these, you just find something else that, brings you more happiness. So it's all about, just staying happy, man. I mean, you don't want to be in a place where you struggle. One should not have to struggle. Challenges are good, right? Things should be challenging. Things should not be like, in the nature you start struggling with things. Struggle is bad, I think. uh, People think of struggle is cool, right? Struggle means you're doing something good. No, I mean, probably you want to hustle in life, right? You want to hustle and meet up with challenging stuff, not struggle in life. Struggle is what you don't want to do. I mean, that is what you should avoid doing. Do not struggle in, like, figure out something that you don't have that mindset. Like, I mean, figure out how can you like get out of that situation always. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there is also this really good Substack article on when one should move away from a company or move away from a role.
Was it?
It details out like different factors, and if you've not been, I mean, and on that basis you kind of rate. I'll probably attach that Substack article in the description.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was like a really good Substack. I think it's called the Valley Curve or something.
Hmm.
It's someone who used to work in I think Apple and then Twitter or something. I can't really recollect, but it's a brilliant article. And
I
yeah,
do
that,
do
that's
share.
that's yeah, that covers a lot of the points similar, or it's on the similar lines of what you were telling.
Hmm.
Yeah. So coming to other bunch of questions which I have for you, right?
Yeah.
Uh, how how do you believe, like, the roles and responsibilities of a designer today has changed over time? Like like I remember once upon a time when people used to look at designers as someone who would just push the pixels, or someone who was there to make something pretty. They weren't looked at as someone who would help you solve a business problem, right? So how do you believe those things has changed over time?
I think a lot of this, it's a great question, and I think a lot of people want to know, like, what will be expected of them when they join, right? uh, Probably. And I think the answer to this is a little, I would say it depends, which you can pretty much say for anything. But I think the answer to this, it depends, is because it depends on which company or what context are you talking about, right? For example, uh, in smaller companies, like in very 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 small companies, like 2 or 3 people companies, you would still see similarities to where design industry was 6 years before, right? You would still be like pushing pixels and stuff like that. I mean, obviously, you as an individual can take bigger roles and you can contribute in a different value. For example, if you have a better understanding of how product works and business, you can step out of your role and then, also maybe suggest them and give them tips on things that they can do to optimize the product itself, right? And maybe uh, not just uh, hold yourself like close to that position where you're just the designer, right? You can do other things as well, right? So it's okay to not be fixated like with like a role or something. Again, that's the way that I think that it's okay to not be fixated with roles. uh, I mean, even if you're supposed to do other things as well on the side, if it makes you comfortable, sure, like go take a stab at it and figure out what's right for you. In case of in sorry, I think, talking about the general improvement or the general change that I've seen, I think it'll be more or less around the lines of how the perception of UX or the perception of design in general has changed in relation to the value that it has, right? So value is the most important aspect here. Previously in India, again, Indian context, UX was not something that was seen as like a key defining factor. You must have seen a lot of cases or heard a lot of stories where product managers would just make stuff and they would directly give them to engineers, and just engineers would design features themselves and they just ship it. That's it. Not even a designer, not about talking about UX, not even a UI designer, no one. The engineer was the designer, right? They would design. And I know for a fact there's a lot of companies still which do this, not just because they maybe they don't see value, but in a lot of cases also maybe because they can't afford at that point of time. They're so much bootstrapped, to and in that spot where they don't have the budget to hire someone, right? Which is perfectly fine, right? If that's the kind of situation, then it's completely different case. But I think in general, because now industry sees, especially in these bigger cities like the metropolitan cities, people see that okay, there's a lot more value in design now, right? This is something that directly helps you achieve business goals. It's not a support function. You define a business goal. There's product designers who will work on it, and you'll inch close to achieving that business goals. So as this is becoming bigger and bigger, I think the say of design, right, the position of design is also increasing, right? Now it's participating at levels that otherwise were just maybe would not have been possible, because previously design was just a support function, right? But now design is,
Finally have a seat at the table.
yeah, they have become the cool kids now, they have the seat, they have the seat at the table. And yeah, I mean, I think that is something that has definitely changed a lot, at least on a very organizational level. And I think that is reflecting in both how uh, designers are given responsibilities, right, in offices, and maybe also how they're compensated for it, right? The kind of you've seen those reports, you've seen the uh, newsletters, right? How designers are compensated for the kind of work they do. So it's reflected both ways, right? It's not like you're given you're being given money but you're not being given responsibilities, or the other way, right? So you can clearly see designers are also from themselves. I think there's this internal compass that designers are helping companies take bigger decisions, take steps that will eventually lead the company in a place where uh, they become basically designs becomes more beneficial to them. So I think that's more or less, I think that's the change I see, man. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree, especially the seat at the table part.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, it has evolved so much over time, right? Where design has become a function which is directly contributing to the business goal,
Yep.
and which is, I think, the reason why design has been able to earn that particular seat at the table,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I think I want to come to the next set of questions, which is actually how I kind of discovered you, right? Which is through your content, which
Oh,
which you put out on YouTube, sometimes which you put out, on Twitter
Insta,
or
Twitter,
probably
Insta.
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably I don't really follow you that much on Instagram because I don't actively use Instagram that much.
Same, man.
But but Twitter and YouTube have been actively following you.
Hmm.
So I mean that's one story, one part of your story which I would love to know is like how did you get started with content, and I mean why even do content, right?
Yep,
'Cause
yep, yep.
that's something I want definitely love to know.
Okay, so I think content or just YouTube videos, because that's the like the biggest case here, the bigger scenario here for me has been pretty much a part of, I think, what I've been doing from a very long time. This was since college days. I mentioned a while back, I used to have a tech channel. I would do like product unboxing and tech videos and all of that stuff, right? And it was always a lot of fun to me, right? I would make videos. It would just help me sort of share my happiness and just share my thoughts on what I think is like a cool phone or a cool product. And then eventually it became bigger. Brands started sending out like phones and products and whatnot, and it started scaling from there. After a while, it to me it started feeling a bit repetitive, because more or less, I mean, every product more or less is like same, in terms of phones and all that stuff, or in general gadgets. Right now, there's a lot of like innovation in terms of what you see. But previously, there was a place where everything was like just getting like everything was being copied. It was stagnant, right? The industry was not really moving forward. and I kind of lost my interest there. But then the YouTube video thing was always there, right? The content creation was always there, right? From there, like when I was doing that, I think on this side I was also exploring design. This was when I had learned making those thumbnails. So I was working on design on the side. I would make illustrations, and I would make very small bits of art on Illustrator and things like that, just for my happiness, for no goal like otherwise. And that helped me learn some of these tools. And over a period of like the next 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, uh, struggling a little with the struggling is the word here, struggling a little with not being able to find the right content and something that was relevant in the Indian context, right? You would have found like other like design YouTubers and stuff like that, like Chris Do, from the future. And I think there's one designer called, I think it's called Max or someone. He's like one of the OG designers who would make YouTube videos. He would make videos about sketch, right? And previously it was about sketch and
Mhm.
tools, because no one cared enough about like UX design. People cared about how do we even learn tools, right? Because tools are
Yeah.
like, people see their entry as, okay, let's start with learning tools. That's how you get started, right? So I think there's like fundamentally how a lot of people think of joining a new career, or learning about something. So in the next 3-4 years now, as that I learned a bunch of things through my personal experience, and working at in the office, and messing up a lot of things and figuring out, okay, that this is why it happened. I figured that this is a problem. I'm pretty sure it's not just me who has, right? Maybe there's a lot of other people who also have the same problem. So how can I help these people? That is where I think the YouTube channel came in. I mean, I already have the gear with me. I had every single bit of thing that I needed. I knew how it works. So I thought, okay, why not make YouTube videos? So I started with sort of defining to this. I mean, I still have it on my Notion, sort of the creative hustle Notion space, wherein I have like my user persona, like who is my viewer persona, who are my viewers, right? So I did my research and trying to figure out, just took the UX design approach. I did my research and I tried to figure out who are the customers for this product, if you want to put it that way. And what do they want to learn, what are they struggling with. That is where I started, and I started making YouTube videos. I've not been doing a lot of YouTube videos lately because of there's just been a lot of things that I'm right now working on. Besides that, I'm helping out some of the friends personally, trying to mentor them. I would not say mentor, but just helping them out. I mean, so I think that's something that I'm doing these days. But I think for those initial videos, there I've actually gotten a lot of great feedback. I mean, I want to do it, like start it again very soon. But I've got a lot of great feedback around how a, a lot of explanations around the very fundamentals help them pick up where should they go and like what should they do next, right? So I think that has been some great feedback. uh, I recently had one of the coolest things that I saw was, there was recently a team member who joined Gojek, and he mentioned that he started learning design by seeing one of my videos, and it just blew my mind. That even though I did not make enough videos, right, I'm pretty sure I mean, they're just being a little modest there. But yeah, I mean, again, if when someone says that, you obviously feel that, okay, this is making some impact. And then there was this like series of interviews that I did, live series of interviews with a lot of people, with Sapta, with Fatima from Gojek, from and a lot of other speakers, from Madhuri, there was Darshan, a lot of these people. So the idea was to like talk about how they've done it, and how can everyone else do it. Like, what are the secrets, right? If there is any at all, and there's no secret. So, yeah, like, so how do you do it, right? And figuring out, learning from their stories, how can you define your story? And most of the content, like the other content, was around the idea that the design education in India, right? I feel that i I still feel this, it was not just like 2 years ago. uh it needs to be democratized, right? A lot of, I mean, obviously there are a lot of courses that are free and stuff, right? But if you see the quality of education that's there, one, it's either not that great, or it's not relevant to us in general, to the Indian demographic, right? So I think that is something that I want to make more videos on, so it's more relevant to people. over time I have learned, and I think what do people see want to see more of? So that is something I'm trying to work on. Uh, but yeah, that's more or less been my, I think, the main idea behind why the Creative Hustle, the channel, exists. And in ideally, I did not want to just keep it to like UX. I wanted to have like more uh, people, like experts, coming in and talking about their set of things, right? In general about like design, not just like UX. But I wanted it to start from UX and then take the direction as it goes forward. So yeah, maybe once I start making videos back, we'll see where it goes next. But yeah, that's been the idea, man. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think you should make more videos. Um, I think I discovered it somewhere around this time last year,
Oh,
and I remember watching. I think it was around that time you actually released one video, and
okay.
then
That was the last
you
video.
did not.
Yes,
Yeah,
that was the update video after which I did not, make any videos. So I'm guilty. I am guilty of that.
yeah. I was actually really looking forward to your next videos. And somehow
I'm sorry for
I
disappointing you, man, and I'm sorry to all the other people as well that I've disappointed. But yes, this is something that
yeah,
I
but
want to do. I mean, it's not something that I've just left. I love this a lot. I really want to do this like back again. I've actually, from the last 2 3 weeks, I've actually been preparing the next. I'm working on the next video. I've started putting in the final bits on the script or the research that I've done. Probably will be out very soon. I don't want to give a date because then I don't want to disappoint people again. But it'll be coming out very soon. And this is something I want to do back because I know that there is a lot of value in it, right? One thing that I always believe in is there's always going to be someone behind you and ahead of you. So whatever you know in the moment, there's always someone who you can benefit if you tell that to them, even if you feel like, yeah, this is very basic advice. But for a lot of people, that's not basic. That can actually help change their life,
yeah,
right? Just turn it around. So, and I always like tell people that if you have something valuable to share, like tell it, even if it's not through like Medium articles or YouTube videos. Just tell in general, just try to tell it to people, maybe just through post it on Insta stories normally, just write a post or small thing, something that you learned at work or something, so that other people can help reach that level, like wherever you are. So yeah, I think that's something to look up to.
yeah. Definitely. I totally agree with this point. And that's has been my way of content creation as well. At the same time, it has been my way of learning also. Like I have been using content creation like as a reason to learn a lot of new things as well. Like like literally this podcast is one of such ways where I invite people, ask them questions which I know like a bunch of my friends are facing at the same time, a bunch of things which I am facing, and I ask the guests, and that's kind of how I have also been learning. Um, so yeah, I definitely believe the idea behind Creative Hustle and how it can be helpful for a lot of people.
It's a great way to learn. If you heard about the famous physicist Dr. Richard Feynman, he always
Yeah,
talks about how the best way to learn is to actually teach someone else. So yeah, I mean, because when you teach someone else, right, you will do a lot more work to ensure that what you say is not wrong, unless you're the type that would just spread rumors and stuff and would just say incorrect stuff. But then otherwise, whenever you're trying to teach someone, and teaching is a very, like, the word I use, teach, I use it very specifically, right? We're not talking about just sharing stuff, but actually teaching people. I think that puts you in a spot where you become very critical of what you've learned, if it's the right thing, and if there are like more things around it that you need to learn, or you should know about. So I think it's a great way to learn, man, like regardless. And more or less for me also, I think the Creative Hustle has been a platform wherein it enables me to connect with a lot of the cool folks in the industry and learn from what they've learned, and in general sort of figure out like where do I go from here, right? It opens up a door. It opens up like doors for so many things for you, not just like in terms of career prospects, right? But in general, like you can being connected with the right people, being knowing the people that can help you progress your career, help you grow where you want to grow in life, like regardless, even if it's your personal life. For example, say you met with a designer but they're really good with finance, right? You're bad with finance. So even though they're a designer and you met with them originally because of something else, you still can talk to them, and you can learn so much more from them. So I mean, whatever your goals are, having a lot of people around you, I think that helps a lot in life in general. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you on that. Anyways, we have actually reached to the
Running.
last set.
Okay.
No, I am literally never running out of time, right?
That's the best.
Yeah, that's like one of the reasons I haven't put myself in a spot and gone to do live videos,
Okay.
because it means I'll always be running out of time, and there are just so many questions which I want to keep asking.
Yeah, no, I think
So yeah,
agree with that.
and anyways, so I usually end my episodes with rapid fire questions.
Mhm.
So whenever you're ready, we can get started.
How do I get ready? Do I perform some kind of special ritual to get ready?
You, I mean, you just need to tell me that you're ready and we're done.
Let's do it.
Cool. Well, yeah. Generalist or specialist?
Generalist, I guess.
Your favorite designer?
Oh shit, I forgot the name. The one who designed the products at Brown. What's the name of the Michael?
Data Rems.
Oh yeah, Data Rims. Yeah,
Data
he's
Rems.
yeah he's one of the he's I think one of the favorite all time favorite designers. You did not mean UX, right?
No, no, no.
Okay.
I,
Then
I'm.
okay, okay.
I didn't have like a particular category.
Yeah. So it's Data Rams then. Yeah.
Yeah. Favorite YouTube channel?
I don't know how to pronounce it. It's something like Kurze.
Search Kazan.
Yeah. So they make like amazing videos on these concepts. I watch those a lot. They're very well animated and beautiful storytelling. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, it's a German YouTube channel. They realized that their YouTube channel name is very difficult to pronounce, so they actually have like two names. One is Kurt Kazat, and the other one is In a Nutshell.
Oh, nice. This I did not know this progress, but yeah, that's great to see.
Yeah, they've been making content for quite some time, and they're like amazing at what
Amazing.
they do.
Yeah, man. Crazy.
Cool. Last question: if you could go back in past, and if you probably had the opportunity to go to a design school,
Mhm.
would you do it?
You know what? I don't know honestly. I mean, uh, I've not really faced anything which I would say I've missed, right? Which gets in my way of. I know this is no longer a rapid fire answer now. This has become. I would say no. So no is the answer. Uh, this might change in future. Maybe in future the future Sahil would think differently, but the current Sahil thinks probably no for now, because I feel like there's so much for you to learn around you that you can learn. uh, but yes, one reason, very important reason, which people miss, because of which colleges are so good, is because of the friends you make, right, of the people that you surround yourself with. And I feel I've been lucky enough to be able to have been able, I mean, just through these social platforms and everything, right? uh to have been surrounded by a lot of smart people, in the design industry, just like yourself. And it's just great, the power that it gives you. I think that is something, that is one bit of, like the college, which helps you grow, the people around you. For the education itself, I am not very sure what all I have missed because I've not been to a design school. But I think it's pretty much. I think I've learned a lot of things otherwise as well, like in general, on a job. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's okay. I would not take that very seriously, but that's me. So, yeah, take that advice with a grain of salt. Yeah.
Yeah, cool, man. we have finally reached the end of the episode. It has been a wonderful conversation to have you. At the same time, it was brilliant to have you on Product Stories. I had a wonderful time. I hope you had a good time
Yeah,
talking.
I loved it, man. I enjoyed. It's great questions. I think a lot of these questions are something that people really look out, you know, for. I mean, they really want to know about all of these things. So I think you've covered great questions that answer both fundamentals as well as go a bit deeper into, uh, the things, the advanced, maybe a bit more advanced. So I think pretty much covers the spectrum. So yeah, and it was great, having this discussion on a Saturday adds a bit of chill to life. I was just sitting alone, just not doing much. So this is, yeah, this is great to do, man. And so, like, thanks a lot for organizing this. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, thanks a lot for joining and taking your time out on a Saturday as well. So super glad you were here, man. Thank you so much.
yeah. Thank you. I hope I come soon again someday.
Yeah, we should definitely do it sometime.
Yep, yep, yep. Awesome.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Product Stories for more such episodes.